here today. All that we accomplish is for the pursuit of truth, for the greater glory of God, and for the service of humanity. We ask these things in your name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Father. If you wouldn't mind remaining standing for just a moment of silence for all those that we've lost recently, to include my dear Uncle Ivan, who served on the council for many years. Thank you. And Father, thank you very much for taking the time to help us. Roll call, Ms. Sandra.
Mayor Donald Hewish.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tempore Margaret Morales. Present. Councilmember Rich Lindemann.
Here.
Councilmember Dania Costa.
Present.
Councilmember Ray Shelton.
Present.
Councilmember Michael Baldenegro.
Present.
Councilmember Jose Grijalva.
Here.
City Manager Doreen Watson.
Present.
City Attorney Juan Pablo Flores.
Present.
City Treasurer Luis Pedrosa.
Present.
Thank you. Item number 5, persons wishing to address the council in writing or verbally on any item not on the agenda. Ms. Andrade, do we have anybody this evening?
Mr. Mayor, I do not have any requests.
Thank you. And just a note to the public that may be watching, you're able to, if you'd like to participate in that part of the agenda, you can contact the city clerk's office and they'd be happy to schedule you to be able to do that if you'd like. Item number 6, discussion decision on approval of consent agenda items. A, expenditures for the month of June 2020 totaling $2,933,555.50. B, meeting minutes for May 26th and June 10th, 2020. C, Personnel Appeals Board reappointment of Luana Diffie effective July 1st, 2020. And D, Finance Committee reappointment of Council Member Jose Grijalva, who, by the way, will act as the new chairperson as Mrs. Morales is the Mayor Pro Tem now, effective July 1st, 2020. May I have a motion?
Mr. Mayor,
Mrs. Morales,
I move to approve consent agenda items as listed.
is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Morales, second by Mr. Shelton to approve the consent agenda as presented. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Lindemann.
Yes.
Councilmember Acosta.
Yes.
Councilmember Shelton.
Yes.
Councilmember Baldenegro.
Yes.
Councilmember Grijalva.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tempore Morales.
Yes.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes. Again, I'd like to thank Ms. Diffie and Mr. Grijalva for their valuable service to these committees. Thank you very much.
And I'd like to thank you, Mayor, for the recommendation, and also Mrs. Morales for serving well, and she was a great leader, and I have big shoes to fill, so I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. And he's not talking about your feet. He's actually talking about your example of service that you've given.
Thank you.
Just a clarification. Okay, item number 7, presentation, discussion, direction on proposed use of CDBG-CV CARES Act funds. Ms. Gonzalez, please.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. So, as you all are aware, the City of Douglas got an additional distribution of CDBG funds through the CARES Act for the COVID pandemic. The amount is $101,580. Our internal team has been meeting and discussing the proposed use or the possible use of these funds, and that is what we are going to present to you today. So, the Federal CARES Act was passed by Congress on March 27, 2020. and it made available $5 billion in supplemental CDBG funding grants to states and local governments to prevent, prepare for, and respond to the coronavirus. And our allocation, as I said, was $101,580. Under this funding, the 15% cap on the amount of grant funds that can be used for public services is eliminated. Any eligible costs paid by the city are reimbursable, and the deadline for the use of these funds is December 31st of 2020. A grantee may submit a substantial amendment to its most recently accepted CDBG action plan for the first CDBG CV allocation. Our most recently accepted CDBG action plan was the fiscal year 2019. We have spoken to our consultant who will be preparing the substantial amendment for us as soon as we give them word on what the proposed use of funds are. We also will need to amend our citizen participation plan to establish expedited procedures to draft, propose, or amend the consolidated plan. Because we did not know of this distribution when we submitted our action plan for fiscal year 19, we didn't include the use of these funds. And so we have to do the amendment to include the use of those funds by December 31st of this year. And the expedited procedures that they are allowing waivers for are for the public participation periods, the public comment periods, and holding the public hearings. So instead of a 45-day notice, they're allowing municipalities or grantees to do a 5-day comment period, and none of the public hearings have to be held in person. We can do online. So our consultant, along with staff, will prepare the substantial amendment, and we will bring it to you for consideration at the August 12, 2020 meeting. So tonight, we are seeking feedback from Mayor and Council on staff's proposed use of funds. So there is a quick guide to eligible activities to support coronavirus and infectious disease response. And some of those are buildings and improvements, including public facilities, for testing, diagnosis, or treatment. If Mayor and Council so determines, they can designate a facility to rehabilitate and establish an infectious disease treatment clinic. And we can acquire and rehabilitate or construct a group living facility that may be used to centralize patients undergoing treatment. We may also rehabilitate commercial buildings, or like a closed hotel or old school building that's not in use. But we have to be able to show that we can quickly rehabilitate it and that it will be used solely for coronavirus treatment. Other eligible activities are assistance to businesses, including special economic development assistance by providing grants or loans to support new businesses or business expansion to create jobs and manufacture medical supplies necessary to respond to the infectious disease. Another use is to avoid job loss caused by business closures related to social distancing by providing short-term working capital assistance to small businesses and enable retention of jobs held by low and moderate income persons. And we can also use the funds to provide technical assistance, grants, loans, or other financial assistance to establish, stabilize, and expand micro enterprises that provide medical, food delivery, cleaning, and other services to support home health and quarantine. So the provision of new or quantifiably increased public services to carry out job training to expand the pool of healthcare workers and technicians that are available to treat disease within a community. Provide testing, diagnosis, or other services at a fixed or mobile location. Increase the capacity and availability of targeted health services for infectious disease response. within their existing health facilities, provide equipment, supplies, and materials necessary to carry out a public service, deliver Meals on Wheels to quarantined individuals or individuals that need to maintain social distancing due to medical vulnerabilities. So after several meetings with our internal team, we decided that the funding priorities based on everybody's feedback will be to fund grants to be used as public service grants for nonprofit agencies. We would use a subrecipient, United Way of Sierra Vista. We've already spoken to them and they are willing to do so. They are doing the same for the city of Sierra Vista with their CDBG funds. And we will let them know how we want to divide the grant up and who of our public service nonprofit agencies in the area would get funding. So the area nonprofits will be able to access funds to assist community members who are in dire straits due to the coronavirus pandemic. They can be earmarked for specific nonprofits, and the nonprofits that we've spoken to and decided on are the Meals on Wheels program over at DARC, rental and mortgage assistance via St. Vincent de Paul, food and commodities distribution from the Douglas Area Food Bank, and COVID-19 testing from Copper Queen Community Hospital and Chiricahua Community Health Center. So our subrecipient contract will specify the federal requirements, the schedule, the scope of services, and the budget for each of those activities. And so what we need from you tonight is option A, direction to staff to move forward with the proposed use of funds as presented. Or option B is modify the proposed use of funds and tell us what those modifications would be.
And just to clarify, what we're asking you for today is direction, specifically because whichever direction you give us will tell us what we need to do in order to go through the process of bringing back to you the action item that will secure these funds and allow us to move forward with utilizing it.
So our next steps are to establish the amounts for funding priorities and allocations for the eligible programs and services. We will draft a subrecipient contract with United Way if that is Mayor and Council's direction tonight. And we will have our consultant draft the amendment to our 2019 annual action plan to include the use of these funds. We will also have to draft the amendment to our citizen participation plan and hold a public hearing and issue a public notice to let the public know how we will be using the funds.
Thank you. Mayor, Council, do you have any questions, Mr. Shelton?
Okay, Senior, in your opinion, which plan would help Douglas the most?
In speaking with the nonprofits, there is an increased need in all the areas that we are proposing to fund. That is why we're hoping to divvy up the funds, because they do have to be completely used by December 31st. If we give one organization too much money and they're not able to use it by the deadline date, then we have to give that back to HUD. So there's an increased need for meals, for the Meals on Wheels. They're delivering about 600 meals more weekly. The food bank is distributing food to about 230 to 250 families at every distribution. Rental assistance and mortgage assistance and utilities assistance at St. Vincent de Paul requests have been increasing since the pandemic hit. And of course, Chiricahua and Copper Queen ran out of funding to do the blitz testing, so we're hoping to provide them some funds for that as well.
Okay.
Mayor?
Yes, Mr. Lindeman, please.
Were you finished, Mr. Shelton?
You-
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Lindeman.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to thank the staff for doing all this work, and this is certainly good news, and we're all for it. And I wholeheartedly think we should go with the staff recommendation of option A.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any other questions, discussion? Mr. Grijalva, please.
Mayor, I just wanted to ask, when this passes, however it'll pass, with all these organizations that are a part of this plan, can we put, maybe in the newspaper or on our website, the eligibility to join, to get this help, like the St. Vincent, what's the eligibility to get, the rent help, or the Meals on Wheels, what number can they call, what's the eligibility for them? Is that possible?
Yeah, we can contact them, definitely, the nonprofits, and ask them to give us their application process or how to go about obtaining their services.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Grijalva. Anyone else? I also would like to thank you. I know, it seems like a lot of money, but it's really not. When you see some of the scope that you presented, what it could be used for, I was thinking, how on earth would that ever be possible with the small amount of funds that we received? However, I think you found some very, very critical areas that we can have a direct impact in, and I appreciate that. So, yes, Mr. Flores?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just in case Councilmember Acosta wanted to join the discussion, I wanted to put something on the record to make sure she
Thank you. Just so you know that Mrs. Acosta works for one of these agencies that not would benefit, but would receive some testing funds. And so I don't feel it's a conflict of interest. We've asked the city attorney, and he'd like to point that out. So for the record, so everybody knows.
Actually, Mr. Pedrosa also mentioned that it may also apply to...
That's right, Mrs. Morales. Thank you.
I think the same analysis goes. Sometimes a question of conflict of interest comes up for council members. Conflict of interest is defined as a substantial interest in any contract, sale, purchase, or service to the city or its council members. A substantial interest means any non-speculative pecuniary or proprietary interest, either direct or indirect, other than a remote interest. As city attorney, I do not find a conflict of interest, and note that the agenda item is important to the community and council members Acosta as well as Council Member Morales, and as employee of Chiricahua Community Health on the part of Ms. Acosta and Copper Queen on the part of Ms. Morales. They should be able to participate in any COVID funding discussions, to include discussions of funding COVID testing through their respective employees. Thank you, Mayor. That's all.
Thank you very much. So I don't know if you two ladies were holding back, but if you want to add anything or your insight, we greatly appreciate it.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
For me, for Copper Queen, I just would like to say that I would like to go with option A. I think it's very beneficial that we're able to do more COVID testing. We're seeing a large increase right now in people wanting to be tested, not just because they have the symptoms or they're symptomatic, but because they've been exposed to somebody that has been exposed to COVID. So that we have a lot of people that are still wanting to be tested. The Blitz last week, I know, there was supposed to be 500 people scheduled for that, and I think there was 70 that didn't show up, so we had around 430. I know the Blitz in Service today also filled up. So I think it's very crucial to continue this. It's very important for the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Costa, anything?
I just want to thank you for the hard work and also just echo what Ms. Morales has touched on. I think there's a huge, I think it's obvious to everybody that there's a huge want for our citizens who are concerned and want to be tested, and unfortunately funds are dwindling. But working hard and because of your hard work, we appreciate you finding these extra funds and how we can use them effectively for the community. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I think you have your direction. Everybody's feel comfortable with option A?
Hey,
A? Okay. I'll follow my staff recommendation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, item number 8, discussion decision on approval of second reading of ordinance number 20-1119, an ordinance of the mayor and council of the city of Douglas, Cochise County, Arizona, authorizing the acceptance of donated unimproved real property from Roger W. Leinenweaver and Connie Leinenweaver, identified as Cochise County parcel number 407-57-009E. Mr. Flores?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. We're bringing this item up on the second reading. We've already started the process to do the phase 1 environmental study. That's going to cost us in the neighborhood of a couple $1,000s. The title report is going to be an additional $500. As much as we'd love to somehow get around doing those things, they're essential, they're necessary, and they're required in order to protect the city. So I believe at the end of the day, the city will be getting a benefit. We'll have a nice little piece of property on Kings Highway for whatever use the fire department or other members of the other departments in the city would have. And everything is coming along nicely. We should be ready for third reading and closing this matter out by late next month. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. May I have a motion?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Mr. Schultz.
I recommend the mayor and council approve the second reading of ordinance number 20-1119 to place it on third reading by number and title only.
Is there a second?
I second.
Motion by Mr. Shelton and seconded by Mr. Valdenegro to approve the second reading of ordinance number 20-1119. Any discussion or comments?
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Mrs. Costa.
During the, after our last meeting and this was brought up, I had citizen concern over the property taxes. Do we know how much we would be liable for on that?
Mayor, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Flores?
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Acosta, when we acquire the property at closing, the taxes are going to be all paid up, and seeing as it's going to be in the city's name, it's going to be tax exempt up until the time we sell it or decide to transfer it to some other entity. So that should take care of it in the meantime. So.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Councilmember Lindemann,
Yes.
Councilmember Acosta,
Yes.
Councilmember Shelton,
Yes.
Councilmember Valdenegro,
Yes.
Councilmember Grijalva,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tempore Morales,
Yes.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, motion carries. Ms. Andrade?
Thank you. An ordinance of the mayor and council of the city of Douglas, Cochise County, Arizona, authorizing the acceptance of donated unimproved real property from Roger W. Leinenweaver and Connie Leinenweaver, identified as Cochise County parcel number 407-57-009.
Thank you. Item number 9, discussion decision on approval of first reading of ordinance number 20-1120, an ordinance of the mayor and council of the city of Douglas, Cochise County, Arizona, amending Article 5 of the zoning regulations, section 501.7, property development standards, and section 501.8, corner lot, all pertaining to carports, establish severability of components of ordinance, and establishing an effective date thereof. Mr. Gardner, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. As noted here, this is a discussion of carports. There's two separate issues. There's carports on small lots and carports on corner lots. So these are recommendations that came from the Planning and Zoning Commission back in April. They did review, based on citizen and council requests, they reviewed carports and setbacks. A little reference to what setbacks are for some of the folks that haven't had to deal with zoning before. This is how far anything that's built on a property has to be set back from a property line. Those vary based on the minimum size of the property, fronts, sides, and rears. They exist for aesthetic reasons to create front yards. They exist for privacy, to keep homes spread away from each other, and for safety, particularly for fire reasons. As zoning regulations change, the process from this is the Planning and Zoning Commission, who's appointed by this body. They're kind of the specialist in this, so they will hear them and make a recommendation to this body to make a final action. This is the first of many reviews you'll be hearing about the zoning regulations. They're kind of out of date and they need to be brought up to speed, so you're going to get sick of me eventually. First, what is a carport? Carports open on at least 2 sides. Once you start enclosing 3 or 4 sides, now you've got a garage, and that's going to be treated a little differently. So keep that in mind, that this does pertain only to roofs with 1 or 2 sides, and of course the upright supports. That's an important distinction, particularly for fire under building code. There's a big difference between a carport and an enclosed structure. First, we're going to talk about the small lots. These are the lots that have 6,000 to 8,000 square foot minimums only. And we're only looking right now at the side setbacks. I will get back to the front setbacks, but this is only particularly the sides, which currently, depending on the size of the lot, are either 5 feet or 7 feet. So this is a diagram of the standard 6,000 square foot lot. It is 50 feet wide by 120 feet deep. And that little box in the middle that says 40 by 80, that's the area that you can currently build in. It shows a 20-foot rear setback, a 20-foot front setback, and 5 feet to each side. Now, as we drive in these denser neighborhoods today, you'll see that there's a lot of them that currently have these existing carports because they were either built without permits or they were built before the regulations took effect. So we often get requests from citizens, why can't I do this? We see them all throughout town. And there really isn't a good answer for that in these smaller lots. Some examples, and these pictures might be a little hard to see. Okay, these TVs show up a little better. You can see the carport there. Is there a laser on here? So we can see a carport here that is right up against the property line. It's a cover with one side, the wall of the house. We see 2 here, and these are set back. That's not quite 5 feet, but we can see them. They're pretty frequent. And they don't really infringe on the smaller lots, they don't really infringe on the character of the neighborhood. So the Planning Commission has recommended allowing them to go in these 2 small zoning districts, 6,000 and 8,000 square foot minimums, all the way to the property line, which again comes in with what we see. What they don't recommend is bringing it all into all zoning districts. When you have bigger zoning districts like this, it's not necessarily appropriate to build right up to the property line because you do have more room to maneuver, more room to put those property lines in. And again, in the larger zoning districts, there's a greater expectation of houses being spread out, a little more privacy. So again, that recommendation for the first half of this is to permit them in the SFR 6 and SFR 8, the single family residential, 6,000 and 8,000 square foot minimums, to the property lines on the sides. Carports are already permitted in all zoning districts to extend 6 feet into the front property line, the front setback. We back up a little bit to this 20 feet on the top of the screen. That's really 14 for carports in the front yard. We'll get back to that because there's some discussion of changing that, so we'll get back to that after we look at the other half of this. Before I move on to the other half, does anyone have any questions on the small lot side setbacks? Or do we want to save all questions for the end? Because this is kind of 2 issues.
It's fine. Does anybody have a question regarding this portion of the presentation?
Mr. Gardner?
Yes, yes, Mr. Valdeneo.
The drainage, is there a problem with the drainage? Would it have to be inside the person's property?
It would have to maintain on their property line. There is a requirement that when your water drains off your roof or anything else, it does stay on your property. So that 0 foot, unless you have a gutter on it, effectively does kick back in a little bit just to be sure that all the water runoff stays on your property. You're just by default not allowed to drain water on other people's property.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Anyone else for this portion? Thank you. Please proceed.
Thank you. The other question pertains to corner lots. We talked about front setbacks, rear setbacks, side setbacks. On corner lots currently, the side setback facing the other street is required to meet the front setback. And which in the side setbacks vary from 5 feet to 20 feet. The front setbacks vary from 20 to 40. So this often pushes a lot more room. Corner lots give up a lot of room to be able to build things, even things like carports. Now, the reason for this is again a drawing of that. This is showing a 32,000 square foot lot, showing those setbacks of a 40 foot to the front, 30 feet to the rear. Normally 20 feet to each side, but on the right there you see because they've got that other street, they're pushed back 40 feet. They're losing another 20 feet, doubling the distance that they have. And this is an area that, while it's understandable we may not want the homes pushed that far, the carports may not be as big an issue. Now there's a reason why this was passed and why it doesn't really apply to Douglas. So we have drawings here, and you'll forgive my kind of crude drawings, it's not my forte. But what we have here is drawings of 2 blocks. The block on the left shows, if we imagine that there's streets on all 4 sides of that, there's front yards on all 4 sides, but down in the corners you have a side yard on the same side of the same street as a front yard. So there, that this regulation that the side setback has to meet the front setback is appropriate. Otherwise, on the corners, you get a nice line of homes, and then the corners, you get a big jut out of somebody's home or carport. So that's why this regulation was passed. However, nobody looked at what the blocks in Douglas actually look like, which is the blocks on the right, where we tend to have just 2 strings of homes. There's no front yard, side yard. So the regulation is not necessarily appropriate. So what the Planning Commission recommends is for carports only to permit them to permit them at the regular side setback. So that 40 feet on the right for carports would become 20 feet. It would give people 20 more feet in the larger lots to build their carport, which 20 feet actually accommodates 2 full-size parking spaces, which is a 9 by 19 is your commercial parking space. So it gives you a lot of extra room, but it doesn't necessarily kick the houses all the way out to that 20 feet. The one caveat on all of these is a standard zoning regulation. I'm sorry, I'm kind of throwing a lot at you here. Is nothing can be built in what we call the site distance triangle, which I probably should have drawn a map for because it would have made a little more sense. And what that is when you're at a street corner or a driveway, you want to be sure when you look to the left, look to the right, there's nothing blocking your vision. So that's the one other caveat that already exists is nothing can be built in that site triangle. So while we are allowing them to come out farther to the side, there is always built into the regulations. You can't build it in a spot where if I'm driving down the street and I'm at the stop sign, that I can't see past it if there's a car parked in it. And again, we are still at that 2 sides, not 4 sides, because now we've got a garage. So with that, I presume there's probably some questions on the second half.
Any questions on the second half of that presentation?
Mayor?
Yes, please.
I want to thank you for doing all the work that you've done. This is all the legwork and the explanations, and everything is very clear. My question is on the side, on corner lots. The way it's written, I think you should be able to put your supporting post on the property line, that drawing, because many of the lots on the corner, such as mine, curve. And the sight line doesn't play any part because as you're driving, you pass my house before you come to the stop sign by about 60 feet. And so that I don't believe the sight line would interfere at all if I put a carport on the side of my house. So I want it to be the same as inner lots where you can have the support post on zero lot line.
So the Planning Commission did talk about this, did talk about putting all carports with that 0 lot line, and they went back and forth quite a bit and ended up unanimously deciding that they only wanted it on the small lots because they did have concern on the larger lots, and I'm afraid I don't know exactly where you live and how big your lot is, that regardless of corner or not, they were concerned that if you were going all the way to the property line, it was going to be inappropriate in the denser in the larger lot neighborhoods, the less dense neighborhoods, and would make them jumbled and wouldn't create that separation of houses that there is really expected in the 16,000, 32,000 square foot lots. Of course, this body certainly is not required to take the planning commission's recommendation. They can modify it as they see fit.
Thank you. I'm trying to think of the catch-all because I'm not the only one that is caught in this predicament throughout the town. But that's what's the hard thing, and that's why this is taking so much time. Because you can't come up with a one-size-fits-all for everything, and so there has to be some built-in flexibility, somehow. I'm not exactly sure the legalese on doing that, but I would say you could make an amendment to go to 0 lot line on corner lots, provided that it causes no fire damage or hazard. It doesn't interfere with the sight line, and water stays on your property from gutters, because what's next to you is a street. And certainly, everybody can drive by and it's not going to bother, because you park there anyway. If my parking space caused a sightline interference, I would have heard about it. They would have built it that way. And since I parked there anyway, just an example, I'm using myself as an example, I should be able to cover my car. So that's that was my reasoning.
I would like to make it clear, because again, I'm not sure everyone is familiar with how, I forget, I've been doing this for 10 years, I forget not everyone is familiar with processes. There is always the relief valve of the City Board of Adjustments, who could grant a variance to any of the zoning regulations based on hardships, particular layouts of lots. I don't know if that's something that we prefer to encourage, that on larger lots folks go to the Board of Adjustments as opposed to making a blanket change. But so there is always that relief valve if there is a problem.
Mayor, if I may.
Please.
And that's fine, and I know the process. But that runs up to more red tape, and it's very limited to the Board of Adjustment. So essentially, nothing can get passed through that. So I prefer not to go that route. I prefer just to say, you can do it for these reasons. And if you meet these conditions, then you're fine.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments on this portion of the discussion?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Ms. Morales.
I just wanted to ask you, so on people that live close together, don't have a carport, but they want to build a carport, how does that affect them? Are they able to do that? Do they still have to get permission from the next door neighbor to build that carport? Are they allowed to do that?
They would not be required to get the permission of the next door neighbor. To be honest now, doing it with permission from the next door neighbor without a trip to the Board of Adjustments is a little shady, for lack of a better word. I know it's the way we've been doing it. This is going to formalize the process that we've really already been doing. So if this passes as is, those smaller neighborhoods, they'll just come in for a building permit for that carport without having to go through a process. So if you've got a next door neighbor who doesn't particularly like you, they're not going to be able to shut that down for you anymore.
Okay. Sure. Thank you.
And part of the review process will make sure that if it does go to the property line and it looks like the water drainage will end up on somebody else's property, they will require, before they issue an occupancy permit, a final approval to make sure that there's a plan to make sure that water doesn't get on neighbor's property.
Correct.
Okay, may I have a motion?
Thank you.
Mayor,
Yes, Mr. Lindemann.
I move that the mayor and council approve the placement of ordinance number 20-1120 on its first reading by number and title only.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Lindemann, second by Ms. Morales to place ordinance number 20-1120. Is that what I understood your motion was?
Yes.
Yes, thank you
First
very
reading
much.
by number and title
On
only.
first reading by number and title only, thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing none, roll call please.
Councilmember Lindemann,
Yes.
Councilmember Acosta,
Yes.
Councilmember Shelton,
Yes.
Councilmember Valdenegro,
Yes.
Councilmember Grijalva,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tempore Morales,
Yes.
Mr. Mayor,
Mayor votes yes, motion carries. Ms.
Mayor,
Andrade?
there's the second part to that.
Thank you. Mr. Lindemann?
Yes, thank you. I move that the mayor and council approve the first reading of ordinance number 20-1120 and to place it on the second reading by number and title only.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Lindemann, second by Mrs. Morales, to approve the first reading and place it on second reading by number and title only. Any discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Councilmember Lindemann,
Yes.
Councilmember Acosta,
Yes.
Councilmember Shelton,
Yes.
Councilmember Valdenegro,
Yes.
Councilmember Grijalva,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Morales,
Yes.
Mr. Mayor.
Mayor votes yes, motion carries.
An ordinance of the mayor and council of the city of Douglas, Cochise County, Arizona, amending Article 5 of the zoning regulations, Section 501.7, property development standards, and Section 501.8, corner lots, all pertaining to carports, establishing severability of components of ordinance, and establishing an effective date thereof.
Thank you. Item number 10, discussion decision on approval of resolution number 20-1423, a resolution of the mayor and council of the city of Douglas, Cochise County, Arizona, establishing a formal abatement policy to more efficiently carry out the precepts of Chapter 8.32 of the Douglas Municipal Code for the city of Douglas. Mr. Gardner?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Again, this pertains to policy on abatement and demolition. This body may remember at the beginning of this year, the city did demolish a structurally unsound home over on 4th Street that was starting to lean into a neighbor's home. After doing this, we discovered we didn't have a formal policy to decide what we demolished, what we didn't, what the time frames were on how we notified. But again, the big thing is, what do we pick on? How do we pick which ones are going to be demolished, and are they going to be demolished at all? So Section 8.32 of the City Code does define nuisances and grants the city the right to abate them. This generally talks about things that are structurally unsound, fire hazards, trash, junk, weeds. But we're focusing here on structures, which generally means they're things that are unsound or are fire hazards, or just an attractive nuisance due to lack of maintenance. Criteria. How do we decide what we're going to do to a particular structure? The focus is on things that are unsafe, that are going to cause problems due to a lack of maintenance or the contents of the homes. Immediate danger always has a first priority, and this will not change the city's emergency powers if something is an immediate hazard to take an immediate emergency action. This is things that are unsound but not going to fall down right this minute. So after that, what's the next thing that we're going to look at? Is it structurally unsound? Is it a fire hazard? If we have more than one, how do we pick from those? We're going to start looking at what's close to, say, children's near schools. I have some photos of one that's right next to a school that I'd really like to get cleaned up and off the books. We're always going to take the least intrusive means, and we're not looking at what something looks like. We're looking at what the physical status of it is. Again, is it a hazard? We're always going to take those least intrusive means. If it's structurally sound, can we board it up? Can we build a fence around it? Something to keep people out of it. But if something really isn't at that point, it's falling down, it's not salvageable, now what do we do with it? For example, manufactured homes that are abandoned for a large amount of time, manufactured in even the pre-76 mobile homes, those aren't feasibly economically repaired. Those are an attractive nuisance that just sit until they're removed, whether it's a positive removal or they catch on fire. We obviously want the former, not the latter. Who decides whether or not something is unsafe? Ultimately, it's the city manager's call or their designee. For practice, we use the building inspector. Myself, we use one of the engineers who can walk in and take a look. Quite often, we're dealing with things that you can tell. You can see a house is leaning. You can see the roof is caving in. You can see the floors are caving in. Something that is pretty obvious even to the layperson. That's what we're looking at right now. Someday in the future, we may have to start getting a little more intensive in our analysis. If we get to the point that we really have to think about whether or not something is worthy of being boarded up or demolished, we're going to be in pretty good shape. Next, what's the process? How does this work? Once either city staff sees an issue or receives a complaint from a citizen, we're going to go out and take a look at it. If we decide it doesn't meet code, and this also includes things like weeds and junk, we send a 7-day notice. Please clean it up, please secure it, please fix it. Then we re-inspect it. If it's not fixed, we send another 7-day notice. Please, we really need it, please take care of this. After that 7 days, we do a re-inspect. Now we're starting to get serious. We send a 30-day, you need to fix this. We also at this point have an option to issue a citation if something is a significant problem and take them through to city court. We don't do that very often. We generally do it with repeat offenders, but it is an option. If after that 30-day period and nothing is done, now we start the abatement process, or at least have the option to. How we do that, we're not just sending a letter now. We are sending a letter, certified mail. We're also, and this is a trick I learned working at the county, we send certified and first class because people don't often sign for their certified mail. But if that comes back undeliverable, but we don't get the first class letter back, we know they got the first class letter. We also run it in the newspaper. We post a sign on the property so that there's every chance for a property owner to know this is going on so they can't come to us after the fact and say, whoa, I was going to fix that. Why didn't you tell me? We make sure they know what their options are. And that abatement notice has a timeline and has an estimated cost. The cost is important because once we abate something, we do have the option of putting a lien on the property to recoup our actual costs. So we went through this process once before and then actually abated the home. So some photos of what we're looking at. Well, back to my philosophy of reuse, secure, remove, in that order. As much as possible. We've got some nice commercial buildings that windows are broken, doors are broken, but structurally they're sound. I don't want to knock those down. I want to board them up or fence them off so that hopefully somebody's going to come through and reuse them. I'm looking at things that are structurally unsafe. I'm looking at piles of junk like this up in sunspots. We can abate this and clean this. It's a mobile home frame and junk. We can pay to take all this off, take it to the dump, and put a lien on the property to pay for it, that when the property is sold, we would recoup our money. Also in sunspots, we've got a couple of these boarded up pre-1976 mobile homes. These are not economically feasible to repair. They're just going to sit there until they burn down, or we remove them. The money I asked for in the budget for abatement included removing these. So we do want these out of here before they end up like this. So a couple more shots. At least they've been secured. That's a good positive sign. They've been boarded up, because I've been in some of these where they weren't boarded up and the neighborhood uses them as the local trash dump. There's bags of garbage in there, and that's a vermin hazard. It's a fire hazard. So we want to get these out of here. Now this is a home. This one gives me kind of nightmares. It sits right across the street from Sarah Marley Elementary School. There's 3 or 4 structures on the property, but you can see the holes in the roof. You can see how things are starting to sag. It's an abandoned vehicle that hasn't been tagged in years. So there's another vehicle as well. So we're looking at these. This is not something that's economically viable to save. I've actually walked this property. This property has, the floor is collapsing. There's something has dug holes under the house. So these are the sorts of things we're talking about knocking down, not just your next door neighbor. You know, the house hasn't been filled for a while and there's a couple of busted windows. No, we want to board that up. This we want to take down. This is one of the accessory structures in the backyard. These are, again, fires waiting to happen. I don't know about any of you, but when I was in elementary school, this would have been one heck of a playground. I'd have been over here after school every day if I could have gotten away with it. And that's what we don't want. We don't want kids coming in. We don't want them crawling under the house. We don't want them getting hurt in the buildings. So these are, when we're talking about demolitions, this is the sort of thing we're talking about. So hopefully I've explained what we're asking, and if there's any questions, I can keep going.
Yeah, Mayor,
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Renneman.
I want to make a comment that, nowadays there's fences around all the schools, so the kids got to be in there. But neighborhood kids, I can understand that. And once again, I thank you for all your hard work on this. This has been a problem that's been perennial in this community for, ever. I'm glad we're doing something about it.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
May I have a motion, please?
Mayor,
Yes, Mr. Renneman.
Ms. Shelton, go ahead.
Mr. Shelton?
Okay, Mr. Mayor, and council, I recommend that we approve resolution number 2014-23.
Is there a second by, motion by Mr. Shelton, second by Mr. Renneman to approve resolution number 20-1423. Any further discussion? Yes, Mr. Grijalva, please.
Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to again thank Mr. Gardner, and a lot of the times we see these issues as just to beautify Douglas, but it's also, like Mr. Gardner said, this is something in front of a school. So this is something that we can prevent ahead of time. Something, I don't want to say tragic, but something negative that we could prevent. and at the same time beautify Douglas. And again, this is why I'm thankful we have Mr. Gardner on staff, because this doesn't get done without people like him. So I want to thank him.
Thank you, Mr. Grijola. Anyone else? Mr. Valdenegro, please.
I'd just like to know, is this going to require city employees, or this is going to be outfit that you contracted out?
This, as the previous one was done in January, is done with city employees. So the budget does include this and reflects the cost of dumping the materials. The liens can hypothetically include the cost of staff, but really the expense here is the disposal fees, either to haul away the manufactured homes or to take the remains of the site-built structures to the dump.
But also, Mr. Valdenegro, I think staff will look at each individual situation. If they feel we can do it, we do it, and the cost will reflect that. If we need to contract with someone, the cost will also reflect that in their notifications and notices of abatements and things like that. So we'll rely on staff to know when they've been pushed too far and whether they need to contract that out.
Thank you, Mr. Gardner.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Roll call, please, Ms. Andrade.
Councilmember Lindemann?
Yes.
Councilmember Acosta?
Yes.
Councilmember Shelton?
Yes.
Councilmember Valdenegro?
Yes.
Councilmember Grijalva?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Morales?
Yes.
Mr. Mayor?
Mayor votes yes, motion carries. Item number 11, discussion decision on approval of resolution number 20-1424. A resolution of the mayor and council of the city of Douglas, Cochise County, Arizona, authorizing the execution of a contract between the city of Douglas and Nexus Consulting LLC, a bipartisan federal government relations firm providing professional services for the city of Douglas. Mrs. Watson, please.
Yes, Mayor and council members, tonight we have guests here to present on this item. We had talked to them earlier this year before this council was seated. With COVID, some of the items that they were interested in helping us with in Congress and just change in administration, they're now here to present some of the efforts that they can do on our behalf, not only for the port of entry, but several other topics of need here in our community. So with that, I'm going to let them tell you a little bit more about themselves, but it's Bob Holmes and Anna Ma from Nexus Consulting in Washington, D.C. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to them for their presentation.
Welcome, Mr. Holmes and Ms. Ma. We appreciate you being here with us this evening, and the floor is yours.
Thank you for having us. Thank you, Doreen, for the introduction. Thank you, Mayor and Council. We came from D.C. today, so I'm a little tired. If you can't hear me in my mask, please let us know. We'll speak up. We want to introduce ourselves and tell you a little bit before you have a resolution before you tonight to begin a formal relationship with the City of Douglas and Nexus Consulting, and we're very excited about it. And we want to tell you a little bit about ourselves. Some of the things we've been doing, we've obviously met with a few of you in January. We've been in constant contact with the city, and we've been doing a little bit of legwork on some of the projects that are really important to the city. So with that, I'll tell you a little bit, about ourselves. Nexus Consulting, we don't like to call ourselves a bipartisan firm. We like to call ourselves a nonpartisan firm. We work both sides of the aisle. It's really important in government right now with an administration that's controlled by Republicans and the House of Representatives that's controlled by Republicans, and the House of Representatives is controlled by Democrats, and the Senate that's controlled by Republicans, to have bipartisan, nonpartisan support. My background is in Republican politics. I was a top staffer for a congressman from Arizona, Congressman J.D. Hayworth, from 1995 to 2001. In 2001, I went to a Phoenix-based lobbying firm. I ran the D.C. office. I was the managing director of the firm and ran all their federal operations. And in 2011, I founded the current firm, Nexus Consulting, and really proffered and worked this, my good friend of 20 years, to come join me. So with that, I'll turn it over to Alma to tell you a little bit about it.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I always thank you for having us here. Just a little bit of background on me. I worked on the Democratic side of the aisle. I basically I'm from Tucson, Arizona, so I grew up here in the state. I grew up actually in the border, going across in Nogales down to Hermosillo and back and forth to Tucson. U of A grad, don't hold it against me, those of you who are not. But, U of A grad. And I worked in Democratic politics actually with Congressman Grijalva. He has been, like I said, a father to me. And I was able to work on his career alongside with him, and at the same time I was able to join both the Clinton and the Obama administrations as a high-level federal official then, and then I went over to a national nonprofit before I joined Bob, and he was able to convince me to come to this side of advocacy work. So we definitely are privileged to be in front of you today.
And we're really proud, Mayor and Council, of all our work we've done for the state of Arizona. We've represented almost 20 local government entities here in the state. We've brought over $200 million back to the state of Arizona. So we're really working for the state of Arizona. In fact, this last 8 months have been a banner year. $80 million we've brought back to the state. So we're really proud, and we really feel confident we can help push this port of entry and a whole bunch of other projects that are really critical to the city over the finish line. So with that, we want to talk a little bit about hopefully, there we go. Let's see. Apologize for that. We want to talk a little bit about what's going on in Congress right now and what we're going to be working on. So, as you know, COVID and the coronavirus put to halt a lot of the activity on Capitol Hill. What they did during that time was pass about four COVID stimulus bills, COVID relief bills. One of the things they did was they passed a state and local government portion that helped fund state and local governments. That money was passed down to the state. Governor Ducey, we worked really hard with Governor Ducey to release some of those funds. He hasn't released all of those funds, and we continue to work with stakeholders in the state to release all of those funds, but he did release about $1.9 million for the city of Douglas that you guys are able to use in a variety of capacity. There's going to be another coronavirus relief bill that's going to be passed here in this month before Congress recesses at the end of July. That bill will contain more money for state and local governments. So Douglas will be getting additional money. It's important to note that while the last funds were funneled through the governor's office, these funds will be sent directly from Treasury to Douglas. So you're not going to have to go beat down the governor's door to try to get money. This money will be directly sent. The HEROES Act, which is the House version of the latest coronavirus package, contains $1 trillion for states and localities. The previous bill, the CARES Act, contained $250 billion. The Senate bill will contain significantly less than $1 trillion, but it probably will contain somewhere between $250 billion and $500 billion. So you should see at least several $1 billion more coming to the city of Douglas. Usually in March, it's called the appropriations process. Usually begins with hearings, with markups, and passing legislation on the floor. Again, with the coronavirus outbreak, this has been all pushed back, which has actually been very advantageous for us. When we met with the city council and with the city manager and staff in January, we began to talk about these things. And while we weren't on contract at that point, we thought it was important to get a leg up on these because the appropriations process was moving. That process has been delayed because of COVID. However, it's in a full process right now. In fact, the U.S. House of Representatives this week passed their first 3 of the 12 appropriations bills, including, which is really critical to the city of Douglas, obviously, is the Homeland Security Appropriations Bill, which contains port of entry funding. Due to our Congresswoman's efforts, Congresswoman Kirkpatrick, who's been a stellar advocate for Southern Arizona and for Douglas, she is on the Appropriations Committee, and they included $2.8 billion for all ports of entries that will fund all 17 ports of entries, including Douglas, which is about 5th on the priority list. I want to caution everyone, there's a long way to go until that becomes final, but that bill it needs to be paid. It was passed by the subcommittee, it'll be passed by the full committee next week, it'll be on the House floor by the end of July, and then it goes over to the Senate. We've been really working very hard with our senators now, especially Senator McSally. Senator Sinema is strongly supported, but Senator McSally is in a tough race for re-election, and she's getting a lot of what she asked for. So we had an all-hands-on deck with her state staff and her DC staff yesterday to kind of push some of these issues, including that, and she's going to be supportive, as is Senator Sinema. So we feel very, very confident that we could get funding this year for the port of entry. Again, there's a lot of work to do, but we're going to work diligently on that if we are trusted with the contract. So I want to point that out to you. The other big thing that's happening, and which is going to be relevant to the city, is they're going to do a transportation reauthorization this year. They do that reauthorization every 5 to 7 years. This authorization expires on September 30th, and that will fund all the transportation projects, roads, highways, bridges, for the next 5 years. The House bill has about $500 billion for these projects. The Senate bill has about $290 billion. So they're a little bit off. The Senate bill will probably be the basis of the bill, but this will be important as we look at expansion of the port and we look at improving roads in and around this area, especially on 191, to address some of the issues that are really important. So we'll be keeping an eye on that. So we're now going to focus on kind of 3 critical issues for now. There's so many that we hope to engage with the city on, but these are obviously the 3 most important. The Douglas Port of Entry. As I just explained, we're full speed ahead in terms of pursuing appropriations in FY 2021. As you know, GSA has said that they want that the proposed funding would be in FY 2022. We want to speed up that process, so we're working hard on that. You know, we're in constant contact. We live and work in DC. We know personally every member of the Arizona delegation, and as we explained in some of our conversations with city staff and others today, we will set up meetings. We're not going to be able to have physical meetings like we'd like, and we'd like to have you guys out in DC doing personal lobbying, but you can't at this point because of the COVID crisis. But we will set up meetings, Zoom calls with all our members and their staff to begin that rapport and let them know how important this project is. So we'll be doing that, and then we're going to continue to work. Obviously, the city has had a port advisor, Luis Ramirez and Ramirez and Associates, and they're going to continue to supplement those efforts, and they've done a great job. And we're going to be the DC contact to help push this thing through federally. And we'll, one last thing, we're also going to work, and the city has done a great job already of getting letters of support from the county. We'll work with other organizations, for instance, the Hispanic Chamber, who we work with really closely, and potentially the Arizona Chamber. We've got good relationships there. If we can get with the Arizona Chamber, potentially the governor, to help push this thing and give us greater impetus and greater viability to push this project through. So one of the things that's really critical to the city, we've heard in the last several months, is this EDA application that's going to be submitted in the next, probably by the end of this week. for a little over $1 million for a technical assistance grant at the port. And when that's submitted, we've been talking to, again, we talked to Senator McSally's office and Senator Sinema's office, and within the next 2 days, we're going to have a letter from our 2 senators in support of that EDA grant. The Congresswoman Kirkpatrick's already submitted a letter of support, but having the 2 senators weigh in will certainly be helpful with us. And we'll continue to work with our delegation to get that EDA grant to kind of start working on that, on the port of entry work. The second issue that's really important and critical to the city, and we met with staff and talked about this today, is the standstill that's really happened with regards to the community center project. You know, the city of Yuma signed a joint use agreement to use their armory and their Air National Guard facility. As we understand it, the armory is not being used significantly, and if we could get a joint use agreement for use of that as a community center, that'd be a real amenity for the city and for its residents. And so we're working, and we can work with our folks. We met with the city attorney today, and he gave us a pretty good update about where that is, and we're hopeful that that'll be solved. But if we need to call in our friends from the congressional delegation to weigh in, again, Senator McSally's on the Armed Services Committee and could really help push this thing over the edge. But we'll continue to gauge the congressional delegation on this, including Congresswoman Kirkpatrick, who obviously has been a great advocate for the city here, to get their help if we run into any roadblocks there. The last issue we want to kind of talk to you about, among the many, is flood control. Today we met with the Public Works Department and talked a little bit about Rose Wash and Palm Garden Wash. And we've worked extensively over the years with the Army Corps of Engineers. In fact, we just finished, well, we didn't finish because it's got about 5 to 7 more years of construction, but we got the last infusion of funding for the Rio Flag Flood Control Project, which is very similar to what's going on here. City of Flagstaff, about half the population is in the flood control, is in the floodplain, and we got the last $52 million in funding. Similarly, we're working on 2 other projects, one here in southern Arizona called Tres Rios del Norte in Pima County, on a flood control project. They're in the beginning stages of a project, and we're getting the initial funding this year. And then a third project we've been working on for about the last 6 years, the Lower Santa Cruz, which is the Santa Cruz that actually comes south from here, goes and flows north up, goes into Mexico, flows north into Pinal County, and into eventually Maricopa County. So we're also talking to the Public Works Department about wastewater and reclamation. There's several other projects that we're interested in helping with the city on, including transportation, and we've got close relationships with ADOT and other folks, and with USDOT. Obviously, we think we can get some rural development funding in here. USDA, they've got a lot of money available for wastewater, water reclamation, and things that I think would be very valuable for the city. So I don't want to take up a ton of time, and I don't know if you have anything else to add, but we want to answer any questions you have, and we look forward to the partnership with you guys. So thank you for having us here today.
Thank you. Anna, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
I think.
You got it? Thank you.
I would have been good in the Senate because I filibustered.
Any discussion or questions from the council?
Mayor?
Yes, Mr. Valdenedo.
Yes, the question I want to know is, with Nogales being, NAFTA being approved all the way to Canada, I hear about an interstate, from Interstate 19, direct to Canada. If Douglas gets a port of entry, the grant, are we going to connect into that corridor, or just going to be by means of 191?
Well, that's a good question, and I don't know what the exact answer is, council member. What they're doing in Nogales is it's called I-11. it's been a long discussion. We've been involved in it a long time. But the proposed I-11 would take several roads and create an interstate. Phoenix and Vegas are the two largest cities in the United States that are closest to each other that are not connected by a major interstate. So that's kind of the play. And it would connect to other roads to get up to Canada, but it's a corridor. But my hope, and I think the hope for Douglas, is that that with a new port of entry and with the economic development and with the commerce that's going to come along with this new port, that this will also become a commerce center, and that may include more roads and interstate and potential other things. So I don't know if that's exactly the answer to your question, because I don't really know the answer, but I think there's potential.
Thank you. Mr. Grijalva, did you have something?
Oh, I just had a few points here. As someone who has nothing better to do than watch politics all day, we know that the government, especially with COVID, they have a lot of money. They're printing out a lot of money. They're distributing it. They want to distribute a lot of money. So a lot of these things, and I want our constituents to know that, we don't have right now a presence in Washington, D.C. We don't have a presence with even our, congressional people. As far as the Senate goes, we've been in contact with Kirkpatrick and McSally also, but there's no real foundation there. And as you mentioned, they have this money, and if we're not out there having somebody advocate for us, we don't get a lot of this money. And again, that's to our constituents who say, well, why doesn't Douglas get funding? Why don't we fix our roads? Why don't we have a community center? It's because we don't have that presence there. And with your presentation, like the port of entry, that the funding is for 2022. I mean, you're telling us you want to push it 1 year early. Again, we can't do that if we don't have advocacy out there. Not only that, I want our constituents to know.
Mr. Grau, maybe we can get a motion on the floor, because
I would just, thank you very much, because I was wondering if there was direct questions for them as part of the discussion before we get to a motion. Is there any direct questions to their services that would affect the motion? If not, I'll ask for a motion.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Ms. Morales.
I move that Mayor and Council approve resolution number 20-1424.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Morales, second by Mr. Valdenegro, to approve resolution number 20-1424. Mr. Grijalva.
Thank you, Mayor. And also to point out, we're really getting a bargain out of this, because we would allocate funds for advocacy for, as you mentioned, Luis Ramirez. Now we're getting three for the price of one. So I want our constituents to know it's not like we're breaking the bank for this. This is really a good bargain for the city. And I want to get to also the point where you said you've communicated with us. We haven't had to ask you questions really. You email us about every week, and you answer the questions before we even can come up with them. So I do appreciate that. But the biggest thing that I've seen from your group is in the letters of recommendation that you gave council. You've had success everywhere, and every city that you represented has grown. So I mean, that's what we're looking for. If we can do it in a quicker pace, like you want to help us out, I mean, I just see this as a dream situation for our city. And again, I want to thank you because you came from DC, and it's not a 4-hour drive or so. So I appreciate you being here.
Well, it's an honor to be here, and we're excited, and we wanted to be here because we're excited by the partnership. So thank you for your kind words.
Any other questions or discussion or comments?
Yeah, Mayor.
Mr. Lindeman, please.
I got a question that came to my mind when we were talking about GSA wanted to put the funding or recommend the funding to 2022. What are the chances that we could change GSA's recommendation and put it 2021? I don't know if that's going to be a...
That's a great question, council member. They are working under the expectation that there wasn't going to be as much funding for ports of entry. So they thought they would just fund 3 or 4 or 5, and then next year they would fund 3 or 5 more. And we're high enough on the priority list, but they funded all 17. And again, the credit goes to Congresswoman Kirkpatrick, and her staff, who we work really closely with. They pushed this really hard. They got a letter signed by all 17 congressmen and women who represented a port of entry, and sent that letter to the Speaker and to the House Appropriations Committee to ask for that. So that's why we saw this huge influx of funding. So it's not really that GSA wanted that. They want to fund these as quickly as possible. The fact is that they didn't think Congress was going to appropriate it. And so that's why we worked closely with our delegation to get it forward funded. So, you know, I don't want to jinx it because I think we're in really good shape. We're higher on the priority list. We're, I think, 5th or 6th, and I'm not really sure where we are exactly this year. But they're funding 17. So even if the Senate and they come back and they negotiate and they only fund 10, we're still going to be in good shape. So, you know, I'm really optimistic about where we are. And to get it a year ahead of the schedule, I mean, that's good for the city.
The city of Douglas and the county have already been working on our end of it, and we're doing due diligence and all that stuff as I'm remembering. And so this would all be a good thing. But where does it fit in? Because we are talking about the new commercial port of entry, and that's going to be new construction. So are we going to foresee that this is going to be funded and then go forward with the construction? As I see here,
I'm gonna stop it right there if I can, Mr. Renman, because this particular agenda item deals specifically with hiring this consulting firm, and so I think we'll focus it back in on that. And if I'm sure you can contact them anytime.
We'll leave you our card, and we'd be happy to start that
discuss
discussion.
the ramifications of that process. But it's all in there. If I can make that much of a comment. If I can make that much of a comment, it's all in there. Any other questions regarding this? Yes, Mr. Schultz.
One comment. I know I was talking to you, and like Mr. Grajales said, you've kept us well informed, and you have not gotten one penny from Douglas or anywhere else to do this, and I guess you put in probably over 40 hours in getting everything ready, and already been talking to, congressmen. So I think the public really needs to know this, that you're on board and you're trying to get the best for our community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Mrs. Acosta, please.
I just, I want to thank you for your time, obviously, and all the work that you've put into, getting us up to speed and getting the ball rolling. I just want to, let you know where our constituents, or some of the constituents that I've heard from, are very skeptical about the Port of Entry project coming through, because it's been something that has been in the talks for many years, probably decades, right? So, we are a small community. We need the economic development that a new Port of Entry would bring, and I understand that it is a bargain at the price, for your services. However, our community is not the richest community, so it is quite a sacrifice, financially. So there is a lot of, optimistic hope, I guess, and hopefully, those constituents that are skeptical because they've been hearing about this project for many years can see some kind of movement towards, realizing this project. So I just wanted to make sure that was addressed and that you guys understood where our constituents are, some of them aren't sure how feasible or viable this is going to be.
Sure, we totally understand. And as somebody who grew up in Southern Arizona, and knowing the border communities, absolutely. You hope every year that something would happen. I'd like to quote Mr. Hamilton, just gotta give us a shot. Gotta get it done.
And I think that's one of the beauties of this particular proposal that's been placed before us, is that we're going to know shortly whether or not this is working or not. And so, but I believe wholeheartedly that this is what's needed, because all those things, as you mentioned, Mrs. Acosta, pointing back to economic development, all these infrastructure needs need to be in place for it to be able to happen smoothly and orderly and in the way that we want to see it done. And that's why all those nasty behind-the-scenes situations would be on a firm like this one to be able to knock those things out, so that we can have everything in place, so that when we go out and talk to somebody, look at what we have, this is what's there, not that we brought all this federal money in. That doesn't necessarily excite me as far as making that part of one of our accomplishments in life, of bringing, it's what's going to be accomplished, which will allow us to do all the things that I think this council wants to do and this community wants to do, and that's the beauty of it. And we'll know shortly whether it works or not. I have every confidence that it will, but I think that's where we're at right now. Okay. Oh my goodness, I said too much and we got it. Yes, Mr. Gravo, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to actually echo your point, because, you know, we could talk about how much how much this contract is going to be, but at the same time, our constituents should be excited, because you mentioned community center, you mentioned flood control, all these things. If we do it ourselves or try to do it, it costs a lot of money. But if we have advocates out there and the government's going to say, oh, you need this, here's federal money. I mean, in the end, it saves our constituents money, because, for the community center, it's been talked about different ways to pay for it, and a lot of those ways falls, on the shoulders of our taxpayers here in our city. This way, maybe we can get California and Texas to help us out with it. But again, like Mr. Hewish said, Mayor Hewish, it's not a long-term commitment. We will know if it's working, and if it doesn't work, we could have this discussion again. But again, with your track record, I think we can be very positive about that.
Thank you, Mr. Shelton.
Thank you. One other comment. I like to make mine short and sweet and to the point. If we sit here and do nothing, we're not going to get anything, period. End of conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you,
Mr. Valdenegro, did you have something else?
I just want to thank them for showing up here in Douglas, Arizona, making that effort from the trip all the way down from Washington, D.C.
I'll be honest, this is the first time I've been on we come to Arizona at least once a month. This is the first time I've been on a plane since January 6th. And when the last time we were here, when the coronavirus hit on March 13th. We got kicked out of the Capitol. It was the last time I was in D.C. I was supposed to get on a plane. We were supposed to get on a plane on Monday to come out here to work. And I was a little scared, but the promise of working for this city and this community and this project, but a whole bunch of projects, it was worth it more than anything else. So we're just really proud to be here and really, really excited to partner with you guys. So thank you. Thank you.
And thank you, Council, for your meaningful input. It's important that we work through these processes. Yes, Mrs. Morales.
If I can get a card, because I do have some questions.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I maybe to call you because it's not appropriate for me to ask them here.
No problem.
Uh-oh, now we're all going to wonder. But thank you. Roll call, please. And Mr. Grijalva has been a little bit sad he hasn't been able to start off the voting, so if we'll start with Mr. Grijalva, please.
Councilmember Grijalva?
Yes.
Councilmember Lindemann?
Yes.
Councilmember Acosta?
Yes.
Councilmember Shelton?
Yes.
Councilmember Montenegro?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tempore Morales?
Yes.
Mr. Mayor?
Mayor votes yes, the motion carries. And thank you and safe travels.
Thank you. We're going to leave our cards with you.
Item number 12, discussion decision on approval of resolution number 20-1425, A resolution of the mayor and council of the city of Douglas, Cochise County, Arizona, authorizing the acceptance of federal financial assistance from the U.S. Department of Treasury's Coronavirus Relief Fund, catalog of federal domestic assistance, number 21.019, as part of the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act. Mr. Pedrosa.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. As we've heard in the presentations before and through the budget process, the city was allocated $1,859,063 as part of the CARES Act. Tonight, for your consideration, is to formally accept this through the grant agreement that's in your packets. As mentioned before, this funding is for police and fire response, and obviously that created some funding available for us to use for capital funding. We obviously recommend acceptance of this.
Thank you. May I have a motion?
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Shelton.
I recommend the mayor and council approve resolution number 2014-25.
Is there a second?
I second it.
Motion by Mr. Shelton, second by Mr. Baldanegro to approve resolution number 20-1425. Any discussion? Hearing none, roll call please.
Councilmember Grijalva?
Yes.
Councilmember Valdenegro?
Yes.
Councilmember Shelton?
Yes.
Councilmember Acosta?
Yes.
Councilmember Lindemann?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tempore Morales?
Yes.
Mr. Mayor?
Mayor votes yes, motion carries. Item number 13, discussion decision on approval of resolution 20-1426, a resolution of the mayor and council of the city of Douglas, Cochise County, Arizona, authorizing the submission of a fiscal year 2020 Public Works and Economic Adjustment Assistance Grant application from the U.S. Economic Development Administration Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act Recovery Assistance. Mr. Pedrosa, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This item actually was brought to you last meeting, and we're bringing it up again because we wanted to adjust it to the final engineering study that came forward after the original one was approved. For some background, we're obviously going after an EDA grant that's related to COVID. This is for engineering and design for the infrastructure, water and sewer that is to be servicing the proposed port of entry. The change came with the final design numbers. Actually, those were increased. Those final design numbers came in at $3.139 million. So that's where we had to adjust our grant request, and therefore we wanted to match the resolution to the correct number and be consistent throughout. Obviously, that does increase our match portion, which could be up to 20%. That's $627,800. And I want to mention again that we are asking for 100% funding, but it could. The purpose of this resolution is to show them that we, if we do get funded at 80%, that we have those funds available to meet the rest. As mentioned before, that funding will come from water and sewer.
Thank you. May I have a motion?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Mrs. Morales.
I move that mayor and council approve resolution number 20-1426.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Morales, second by Mr. Baldanegro to approve resolution number 20-1426. Any discussion, comments? Thank you. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Grijalva?
Yes.
Councilmember Valdenegro?
Yes.
Councilmember Shelton?
Yes.
Councilmember Acosta?
Yes.
Councilmember Lindemann?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tempore Morales?
Yes.
Mr. Mayor?
Mayor votes yes, the motion carries. Item number 14, discussion decision on approval of public surplus online auction service. Mr. Pedrosa.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Now, before you, for your consideration is to award a contract with Public Surplus. They are online auction site that many different government agencies contract with to manage online public auctions. Our city charter requires that we basically put notices for any items that are greater than $500. So obviously, this would be an ongoing auctioning process. The purpose is to get old or unused items from the city into these auctions instead of holding, instead of having to wait until we have enough items to hold a physical auction. We can utilize this platform to market those. The auction site charges 7% of the purchase price plus any sales taxes. Those charges would go towards the buyer. The city would not pay anything. And we are utilizing a consortium agreement utilized by many cities in order to satisfy the procurement processes and rules. And that's the Strategic Alliance for Volume Expenditures Consortium. And staff recommends approval.
May I have a motion?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Mrs. Morales.
I move that mayor and council authorize staff to post items determined that the city manager is obsolete, unusable, or surplus items.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Morales, second by Mr. Shelton to approve the use of public service online auction services. Any questions or comments? Yes, Mr. Valdenego.
Who would be accountable for the surplus items that go on sale? I mean, who would be responsible or accountable for those items and the revenue that's coming in?
So those, each department goes through the purchasing agent and determines that they have old or unused items, and they bring those items forward, saying that they're no longer needed. And if there's a value to those items, then we certainly bring those forward, and they go to the city manager for approval that they can be sold.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Mr. Shelton.
One quick question. I know at one time confiscated cars, we used to auction them off. Do we do that anymore or not? And is this what we're talking about also?
Councilmember Shelton, no, this is different. Regarding the confiscation, those laws have changed, and our attorneys have advised us that it is not the way to go as far as auctioning off seized vehicles. So therefore, those auctions are on hold right now. We're not doing those anymore. And they used to be done by the police side. Those funds would go towards police equipment. But this is different from
what
that.
is happening to the confiscated cars, and they're just sitting there?
I believe so. Is that right?
Is that something that is not part of the, or because it's a surplus property?
Maybe we shouldn't have that. Okay, that's fine. I just have been wondering.
Well, Mr. Mayor, members of council, I think the initial question was legitimate in terms of, are we doing that anymore? So I think any further discussion may be out of the scope of the item.
So we'll hold on that, Mr. Shelton, or you could get with Mrs. Watson and get a report on that also. Yes, Mr. Grijalva.
Mr. President, can you give us sort of a, of what type of items we're talking about? Are we talking about like chairs or, don't know if we have books, or is it around those lines?
Mr. Grijalva, some examples would be just old computer equipment. I know that there was some unused car seats as well that we had there that were removed because outfit the police vehicles. There's some value to those. Just unused equipment, old, outdated, that's been replaced.
Stuff. Thank you. Any other discussion or questions? Roll call, please.
Councilmember Grijalva?
Yes.
Councilmember Rondonero?
Yes.
Councilmember Shelton?
Yes.
Councilmember Acosta?
Yes.
Councilmember Lindemann?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tempore Morales?
Yes.
Mr. Mayor?
Mayor votes yes, and the motion carries. Item number 15, informational items and reports from council, city manager, and future agenda item request. Hearing none? Oh, I'm sorry. Please. Anyone would like to participate in that?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Mrs. Morales.
I would like to ask, I know before all this happened with the COVID pandemic, that we were recognizing the businesses who had achieved milestones. I know they're not able to be present, but I would like to be able to go back, at least recognize them during the meetings, and I can take their certificates to them, to their places of business, but I think I would like to go back to doing that, to recognizing them.
Yes,
Thank you.
Mrs. Morales at work said, do you still want assistance from the staff to help you identify that?
Yes.
Yes,
Yes,
okay,
please.
we'll do that. Thank you.
And then one last thing,
Please.
to add to Mayor's comments at the beginning of the meeting regarding Mr. Ivan Hewish. I just wanted to add that I had the great privilege of serving on the council with Mr. Ivan Hewish. He was a great leader in the community, very well respected, and a wealth of information, and he will be greatly missed.
Thank you, Mrs. Morales.
Thank you.
Mayor.
Yes, Mr.
I
Lindemann.
also had the pleasure to serve with Mr. Ivan Hewish for many years. And it was always a very good experience and a learning experience. He was quite a guy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lindemann. Anybody else have any?
Yes.
Yes, Mr.
Mr.
Shelton.
Mayor, I also served with Ivan, and I know he used to referee our football and basketball games, but he was always a real gentleman, always had a sense of humor, had a history of Douglas and Phelps Dodge and of Sonora, and he'll be missed. It's a person that I respected, and I'm sure many people in town share those same thoughts. And just God bless Betty and the family. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shelton.
Mr. Mayor?
Please.
I just wanted to thank the Recreation Department, Public Safety, Fire, Police Department for the Freedom Parade this past weekend. I know that, things throughout the country are just, there's just been such changes with the COVID pandemic. But, thank you. I've heard nothing but positive about the parade and just having it brought to our citizens, and also just continuing with the fireworks celebration for Independence Day. So thank you guys for the work on that.
Thank you. Amen. Mr. Grijalva.
I also wanted to give my condolences to your family. Mr. Mayor, I didn't serve with Mr. Ivan Hewish, but I did meet him a few times before I was in office. He was very kind. The one thing I remember about him is his voice. You could hear him from a mile away. He had a very strong voice. To Mrs. Acosta's point too, about the parade, I just heard good things. And being behind a truck, I didn't think we were going to go that fast. But, just seeing everybody. And I want to make a point that how well it was received. When we started off in G Avenue, there were people parked there. They met us in front of the Huber Middle School, and then they met us again at the end of the parade. So, it was a very popular thing, but the most important part was doing the drive around the Haven and seeing their emotion, seeing them happy, especially since they can't see their family members. That was, I think, everybody that was involved, that was our, the the moment that we will never forget. So I wanted to thank staff and Parks and Rec for their participation, and maybe it could be something regular, at least for them. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Mr. Grajales. Mr. Bodenegro, do you have anything?
I'm just going to miss Ivy, the 7th Street Slugger. My
Seventh
dad
Street
and
Slugger.
my uncles, they played together, and they're all gone. Now they're playing in heaven, so God bless them.
Thank you. Mrs. Watson, do you have anything for us this meeting? I have one thing. I'm a new grandpa as of yesterday, and for the 17th time, and it's one of those days yesterday of getting word of a new grandson and then receiving word of an uncle passing. It's amazing, and I think that's why all of us in this room work as hard as we do, because we know there's somebody behind us coming, and we do it for them. And I want to express my gratitude to each and every one of you in this room and each and every one of our community members that work hard and fight hard for Douglas. It's what keeps us going, and I truly appreciate that, and we'll never be able to express the gratitude to this wonderful community that we have. I just wanted to remind the public, next Wednesday we'll be adopting final adoption of our budget this year. There will be a public hearing prior to that around the 5:15 hour or so, somewhere 5:30 for that one. So it'll be there for final budget adoption. We have some exciting things on there. We'll have an update from Mr. Lindeman, I'm sure, on potential of the wall, and those kind of things will be there. Also, we will be implementing some study sessions that will be coming up. The first one being on the 29th of this month for agenda items that need some more discussion, and so that we can do it in a more unpressured atmosphere of needing to vote on it right away. So if you have some of those items that need discussion, please let me know, and we'll schedule those 2 or 3 at a time so that we can be better prepared and allow the public to have more input for those issues. And with that, we'll go to item number 16. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Mr. Mayor, I move to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Morales, second by Mrs. Acosta to adjourn. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Meeting adjourned at 7:43.